I'm Monica Norris, a museum technician at the Craigleith Heritage Depot. This is my father, David Norris.
Hello.
And today, in honor of Father's Day, we're going to take a look at our family tree and the ascendants in our family tree. So we're going to take a look at our ancestry.
Okay.
Okay, so my dad was just kind of the historian of the family, and he was, I thought a nice Christmas gift would be to get him something to do with our ancestry, and I found out there was a book about the Carscadden family. Knowing we were from the Carscadden family, I tried to get in touch with the author of the book. What was her name? Isabel, and she, I did get a hold of her out west in Alberta, and she sent me a copy of the book and a couple of copies on disc. I give it to my dad, and there you go.
Yeah, and so Isabel's tried to do her best doing a family tree on the Carscadden family, and so we have a copy digitally. It's a Word document, and I will be donating it to the Craigleith Heritage Depot, donating it as a resource in our archives. So if anyone else wants to access Carscadden family tree, they can access it at the library through our archives.
Okay, so our family goes right back to Ireland. Robert Carscadden and Fiona Grace Dean. Robert Carscadden was born in 1771 in Enniskillen in Northern Ireland, and Fiona Grace Dean was born in 1780 in Ireland. And they were not victims, they were part of the whole Catholic Protestant warring that's been going on forever there. And their house got, and they were the Protestants.
And barn burnt down.
Yeah, we had the barn burnt down, rocks thrown at the house, all kinds of stuff for years. And they finally got tired of it. A couple of their sons had gone over to Canada. So then Robert packed up the whole family, rest of the family, and headed for Canada. And en route to Canada, Fiona Grace Dean died. The mother died, and she was buried at sea at the age 59.
Joseph would have been 11 years old when she passed away on the ship. Joseph is the 10th kid, so in this image here you can see, so Robert and Fiona would have been generation 1. We're showing you generation 2 right now, so their family, their kids. They had 10 kids. Joseph was the 10th kid. That's how my father and I are connected to the Carscadden family, through Joseph. But Robert and Fiona's children, some of them had come over earlier. So John and James, I believe, came over first.
I think so, yeah.
And then Robert took his son Joseph and his wife and probably a few of the other kids, and that's when they traveled over and she passed. They joined up with Dean and Thomas in Durham.
Yeah.
Dean and Thomas would eventually go to Thornbury, and
Robert and Joseph went to Peterborough, and early homesteaders there cleared the land, did the hard work, and actually Robert died there. He was 90 when he died, and then Joseph he married a young lady named Mary Jane Hare there, and in Peterborough, and they moved west to join their the rest of the Carscadden family
in Thornbury.
in Thornbury,
Collingwood
area.
Township area, yeah. So what's known as the Blue Mountains now was Collingwood Township, and that's where they moved to. It was actually not Thornbury proper where they moved to. It was Victoria Corners. Isabel, who wrote the book, is related to us through Thomas Carscadden. The Collingwood Township book is a resource that we have in our archives at the Craigleith Heritage Depot and Blue Mountain Public Library. The illustrated history of Collingwood Township includes a couple paragraphs on the Carscadden family and how they lived in Victoria Corners. So here are the paragraphs on the Carscadden family in Victoria Corners. It's chapter 28 of the Collingwood Township book. It says the Carscadden brothers Thomas, Dean, and Joseph settled in the late 1850s or early 60s. Of the three brothers, Dean arrived first, closely followed by Joseph. They both bought land from Andrew Shore, and Andrew Shore is related to L.E. Shore, who is the namesake of our main branch of the Blue Mountain Public Library. It also informs you of where they lived, so their lots, and you can find that on a map if you wish. And then it says that the Carscadden family had continued strong to this day in Victoria through the descendants of Dean and Joseph.
Yeah, this is an obituary of Joseph Carscadden that we found, or I found online on Ancestry.com. It's a good long description of Joseph and his life. And I'll just give you a little extra to it. Joseph was born in 1826 in Enniskillen, Northern Ireland, as we said before. He died in 1931. He listed himself as a gentleman, and my father told me when my father was 6 years old, he knew Joseph until he died in 1931, and he was told by his grandmother that Joseph was a very tall man, 6'3" for the times, and he was an ardent and staunch Orangeman and Methodist, very opinionated, but he stood tall when stones, rocks, and sticks were thrown at him by the Catholics at Orangeman parades and other circumstances. And that's what used to happen. The Catholics and the Protestants fought over here as well. He was married 3 times, and he lied about his age as he got older to convince his wives he was 10 years younger. He lived his final few years with his daughter Alice Ida Carscadden and her husband John Wesley Hutchison at their home in Thornbury.
So this is the third generation. This is Joseph and Mary Jane Hare's children. They had 12 kids. 1 died in infancy, but 11 survived till well into adulthood and old age. We are related through Margaret, so the 10th child, Margaret Eleanor Carscadden. The woman who wrote this book, Isabel Parker, is related through John Albert. So the third child, John Albert Carscadden, is how she's related to the family, to the Carscaddens. And so, yeah, Joseph had a lot of kids. Also, his 11th child, so the Margaret's sister Alice. Alice was the witness to Margaret's marriage, and Alice married John Wesley Hutchison, who was the reeve and counselor of Thornbury, the town, for a number of years. And you can see that in the Thornbury Remembered book. And we have inherited through my grandfather, so Harold Norris, the portrait of
John Wesley.
John Wesley
Yep.
Hutchison. We believe it's his portrait. It's there's a note on the back we'll show you, and you can decide for yourself.
Okay. Okay, this is a picture of John Wesley Hutchison, who's married to Alice Ida Carscadden, one of Joseph Carscadden's children. In fact, Joseph Carscadden lived with the two of them for his final years. This picture's been in my family's possession for, oh gosh, ever. I've always seen it as a child. We've identified who it is now, and it just looked neat.
So if you are related to John Wesley Hutchison, and you recognize him in this photograph, or you have photographs of your own, that'd be really neat to compare them. So this is a note on the back of the frame of the photograph of John Wesley Hutchison. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can read it a little bit better. It says, "This large picture of father is for office, Miss John Hutchison, Thornbury, Ontario." Okay, so Margaret Carscadden is our connection to the Carscaddens. She married a Norris. She was the 10th child of Joseph and Mary Jane Hare. So Joseph Carscadden's 10th child married a Norris. And that's how my father and I are related to the Carscaddens.
And my father remembers Margaret as who was his grandmother, as a very tiny woman. In fact, my father used to tease her by walking by with his arm at shoulder height and barely skimming her head. Used to drive her crazy. Her husband was known as the boss, but she was in charge of the household. And
she was from Clarksburg.
Mm-hmm.
He was from Avening. They moved from Clarksburg, or she moved from Clarksburg to join him in Avening, and that's where they lived and raised their children.
Yep. Well, William Thomas he's known as the boss, and he was a drover. He'd buy and sell livestock, which he shipped from Avening to Toronto. And my dad would go up in the hills with him, around Avening as a child, and his grandfather would buy cattle or some other livestock, and then when they were enough, William would take them to the train station way back in behind the present-day Avening Hall and ship them to Toronto. And we have inherited a lot of their furniture and goods and whatnot, and we're proud of them.
Yes, yeah. So this picture we found in a photo collection that we inherited from my grandfather. It's a collection of a lot of photos that are unfortunately not labeled on the back, so we don't know some of the people in them. We are guessing that this might be Margaret Carscadden. I'll zoom in a little closer so you can get a little bit closer in her face there. If anybody recognizes her as a Carscadden, we would love to know. So Margaret and William Thomas had 3 children. Cecil Harvey, William Harvey, and Stanley. Cecil is my grandfather's father.
That's right. Or my grandfather.
Or my dad's grandfather.
Yep. And Cecil, I'm not going to talk about that.
Sure, yeah.
And Cecil was born in Avening in 1897. He died in 1979 at age 82. He was in the Navy during World War One, and he was on board a Canadian ship that was so near a Russian ship, the Russian ship that exploded in Halifax Harbor, which is now known as the Halifax explosion, that the force of the explosion went up and over his ship and then continued on to shore to destroy Halifax. So he didn't hear anything for like 3-4 days after that when they were on shore trying to put out the fires and save everybody and whatnot. So he told me all about that one time. It was quite the interesting story. So
I didn't meet Cecil. I didn't meet Harvey. I didn't meet Stanley. Harvey passed the same year I was born. The house that my grandfather, or my dad's father, lived in Avening was passed on to him
from Harvey. And from Harvey's father to Harvey.
Yeah, so
who was William Thomas.
So William Thomas would have left the house to not to Cecil, who was the first child that we are actually directly related to, but to the second child, Harvey. And Dad had a close relationship with Harvey as well. Mm-hmm. Stanley was a nice man, I've heard from. He actually died up in Midland in the shipyards. He worked up in the Collingwood shipyards and unfortunately passed in an accident up there.
Yep, 1946, the end of the war.
And we can show you a gift that Stanley gave to Margaret Carscadden. This hymnary book is another item that we inherited through my grandfather, Harold. It belonged to Margaret Carscadden. We're going to take a look at the inside. And as you can see on the inside here, it was given to Miss W. T. Norris, so Miss William Thomas Norris, to Mother, Christmas 1942, from Stanley. So this would be from Cecil's brother, Stanley, to their mother, Margaret Carscadden. So Cecil Carmel Norris married Louise Mary, and here, because Isabel Parker, who created this Carscadden book, didn't know Louise Mary's name at the time she created it, she put it as unknown. But my father does know Louise Mary's last name. Louise Mary Keddy. Keddy from Nova Scotia. So we'll contact Isabel Parker and let her know to update that. So this is a photo of Cecil Carmel Norris at 3.5 years old. It was sent to my grandfather, Harold Norris, by Helen Carscadden. She had sent a lovely piece of lace and a letter to my grandfather and grandmother with this picture inside. And Helen Carscadden is related to Joseph Carscadden's son, John A. And then he had a son named Fred, and Fred was Helen's father. So Helen and Harold are of the same generation. And this is Cecil, Harold's father. So looking at the Carscadden book again, we are looking at the family of Cecil and Louise. Harold Alfred Norris is my grandfather, or my dad's father. There were actually 4 children, so we'll have to inform Isabel Parker about some changes to be made. There were 4 children. Harold actually wasn't the oldest. It was actually his brother named Willard, his older brother, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 10 on the kitchen table during a tonsillectomy. The next in line, the next eldest, would be Evelyn, and then Harold, and then Eleanor. And we have a picture of Willard that my grandfather carried around in his breast pocket. It's of the 4 generations of the Norris family, but it includes William Thomas, who married Margaret, Carscadden.
This is a picture of 4 generation of Norrises at the Evening Home, and how I'll tell you how they relate over to the Carscadden family. In the chair is Willem Norris, my grandfather's first child, and above him is, of course, my grandfather, Cecil Carmel Norris, and to the right of him is William Thomas Norris, who is the boss, who is married to Margaret Carscadden, and that's where our family goes back from in the Carscadden name. And here's a picture of my father and his sisters. They're the children of Cecil Norris. On the left is Eleanor Norris, Harold Norris in the middle, and Evelyn Norris on the right. My father was about 18 years old in this picture and off to the Navy. My father lived, just died a couple of years ago. He lived till 92. We have a lot of long livers in Monica's and mine family. My father was 92, as I said. His father, Cecil Norris, was 82 when he died. Margaret Eleanor Carscadden, Cecil's mother, was 83 when she died. She had a sister, Alice Ida Carscadden, who was married to John Wesley Hutchison. She died at 98. Joseph Carscadden himself, he lived till he was 103. And Robert Carscadden, the oldest descendant we know on that side, was 90 when he died in 1861 near Peterborough.
So we got long lives in our family. That's great.
Something to look forward to.
There we go. Here we have, as just to summarize things, the pedigree chart for myself, Monica Elizabeth Norris. It is a good summary of how the Norris family meets with the Carscadden family. So we have myself at the bottom left, goes up to my dad, David Allen Norris, then Harold Alfred Norris, then above him is Cecil, and then next is William Thomas Norris and Margaret Carscadden, and so that's our Carscadden connection, and then that goes over to Joseph Carscadden and Mary Jane Hare. Okay, so that's our family tree, the connection between the Norrises and the Carscaddens, the connection between Nottawasaga Township and Collingwood Township. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go online to www.thebluemountains.ca, then Books and More, Virtual Branch, and Genealogy, and we have a bunch of resources at the museum and library that you can do your own research and fill out your own family tree. Happy Father's Day.
Oh, thank you very much.